Today, what Hurricane Irma taught Space Coast government and business leaders, a one-on-one interview with the mayor of Satellite Beach, and are cities like Melbourne and Titusville doing the things right for business startups? That's ahead on Brevard Watch. This is Brevard Watch, the news experience focused exclusively on Florida's Space Coast. I'm Matt Reed. My thanks to Community Credit Union, a strong supporter of Brevard Public Schools, for making today's show possible. Our guests today in the BPS studio are County Commissioner Rita Pritchett. She represents North Brevard, including Titusville, Port St. John, and Western Cocoa. She previously served as Titusville City Commissioner. Also joining us is Erica Lemp, Executive Director of WeVenture, an organization based at Florida Tech that mentors entrepreneurs to accelerate their business growth. She's also a board member of the Brevard Schools Foundation. Our guests' opinions are their own, not necessarily those of BPS TV or Brevard Public Schools, but we are glad to have them. All right, let's get started today. You both, like me, survived Hurricane Irma.
We did.
Tell me something that you learned from Hurricane Irma that you hadn't experienced or learned before. Commissioner Pritchett.
With this hurricane, we've been through many of them. I'm most surprised with the water levels that we had in this hurricane along the Indian River and the way that it came up the shore. I was kind of surprised at seeing that and the damage that it caused along the river drive areas up and down the coast of Brevard County.
You mentioned something about docks.
Yeah.
On the Indian River in
Yes.
Titusville. What's the situation there?
We have one left in District 1 along the river, one dock left, and it's a private citizen. All the parks lost all their docks, and all the housing developments lost theirs also. It looks like a bunch of toothpicks on the shore of torn down shorelines.
Wow.
It's amazing. It was shocking.
Seems like anything that faced the southeast really got clobbered this year, including trees that are all brown. It looks like fall in Brevard County. Erica, how about you?
I have to say, even though I think we all knew this about Brevard County and Brevard County residents, there's an unbelievable amount of resilience in the people here. But it was also a huge lesson in perspective. I had the opportunity to volunteer to take calls with Brevard 211 at the Emergency Operations Center. And, the variety of needs of people as they were calling in was, I guess you could say is sort of impressive of the types of things that they needed. For the most part, they just wanted to know whether or not they could consume their water yet, which I think was a common question when we had all of those, all the boil water notices, all the water outages. But, people looking to figure out where their next meal was going to come from because, of course, people got displaced, especially in the service industry. You can't work, then you're not getting paid. And if all of your food has been destroyed because of power outages, it takes a bit for people to get back on their feet. And so it really was a great lesson in perspective to be able to talk to people who were in need and hopefully be able to help them.
What kind of give me an example of the type of person that you heard from and what are the situations that they were in?
Individuals basically, again, saying my food that I had in my freezer and refrigerator, the power's been out so long, none of it is consumable. I haven't been able to go to work. I can't get a paycheck. I need food. I don't have money for gas. Where can I go and what can I do? And I was in there on a Saturday, which is challenging because a lot of the social service agencies are not necessarily open for their regular operations on the weekends. So there were some great groups. There was a church group down in West Melbourne that was handing out a free bag of groceries, up to 500 bags of groceries for people that were coming in, one per family, as well as a crate of water and a free hamburger if you were coming in. And it was so amazing that these kinds of things were rallied together in fairly short order to be able to help the people of Brevard.
Rita, you talked about, and I know that this was a headline recently coming out of the County Commission about setting up some kind of a relief fund. That's not something that you normally see from a county commission. That's something that we expect to see from FEMA, perhaps, or the Small Business Association or Administration. Explain that.
Well, in our budget before, we had provisions to help with these types of situations for families. Like if you can't pay your rent 1 month, and we had a conversation that night, actually, Commissioner Barfield brought it up, that we have more families at this point, because they lost a week's worth of work from the hurricane, that we would have this provision for them, which is smart because it, keeps them in their homes. It, taxpayers, it saves you a lot of money down the road. So he brought the idea back up, and we voted to put that back into our budget to go ahead and get it out to families. I got to mention, with what you're saying, I was very impressed with the community we have here in the county, just the community outreach. Everybody knows each other here, and people helping their neighbors. And I work at a church, and I was watching everybody come together, bring food, and get the food distribution out and help people with their roofs and clean up their yards. And I'm really proud of our community and all that they did. And one thing I was thinking about with this, how hard the hurricane was, we've recovered pretty quick. Not to minimize all the problems we still have, but the strength and the resolve of our community to pull it together so fast, that's a big statement. Someone told me a long time ago they worked out a lot, and they said, it's not so much how fast you run and how you can lift, but it's how fast you recover when you get done. And how fast we've kind of recovered from this hurricane. There's still stuff to go. I'm impressed with our county, the strength of it and its ability to recover from a pretty big event.
Speaking of the community, I think the thing that I learned new as a new assistant superintendent at Brevard Public Schools, I didn't know that our shelters really are run by the schools. They're activated and picked out by the county and the county emergency operations center. But when you go to a shelter, those people who are cooking the meals, running the games, monitoring the schools, those are assistant principals, principals, cafeteria workers, custodians out there trying to take care of our community for time. And my hats are off to them, especially in those special needs shelters.
Yeah.
I didn't realize just how desperate the condition was of some of the folks coming into the shelters. They are people who need very intensive care even when they're at home or someplace else. To be out in a storm in someplace alien to them, that's a tough situation to be in. And I think our special needs shelters were open for a full week after Hurricane Irma. Differences this time around from Hurricane Matthew last year. Do you anything that you noticed?
Well, I think it was just a totally different event. Anytime you have a storm, it's going to be a different event, partially because of the fact that there was so much uncertainty.
Yeah.
I think with the path of this one, we had a lot of people who were saying, well, I'm going to evacuate to Tampa. And then, of course, the storm turned, and then everybody had to, what I was calling, re-evacuate back to the East Coast. And so I think that people who would normally have left the area ended up staying, and I think that there was a lot of people that I talked to after the fact sort of have said, I don't ever want to have to go through that again. It was way scarier than any one that I've ever been through before. But I think a lot of that had to do with the uncertainty that was attached to it. So
I hear a lot of residents saying this is the longest they have ever prepared for a storm in their life. It's like a 2-week storm because you prepared for a whole week before, which is good because it's the first time I've seen people really go out early, get all the supplies, everybody ran out, and then they restocked them all. So I think it was a long event, and everybody was more prepared for it maybe than with Matthew. Probably a little more damage than Matthew, but maybe not as hard to take care of afterwards because everybody was a little bit more prepared.
I was surprised by how many people evacuated this time. After Hurricane Matthew, I went out for Florida Today when I was still a columnist there and sort of beat the streets to find out what did people do during the storm. So many people stayed home that it was almost a mockery of the mandatory evacuation order this time. This time, in the midst of the storm, I think it was just the very next day, we did an online poll of all Brevard schools, families, and employees. That's probably about 90,000 plus people. We had 30,000 people respond. More than half of them evacuated, including people from the mainland, and half of those people drove at least 250 miles away. Now, you, Erica, drove to Virginia to get out of here.
Yeah.
What was that like coming back?
Well, the way up really wasn't bad. We drove overnight. The way back, we were on the road for 16 hours on what is normally an 11-hour car trip. We went to Williamsburg, Virginia, and it was tough. All you could do though was be patient. The volume of people on the road just trying to come home. There were a lot of utility trucks that you could see driving south, aid from other states, which was really, really refreshing to see. But it also gave a little bit of perspective, because I think that when we're all in Florida and we're like, well, it's going to make landfall in Florida, and this is where the majority of the damage is going to be. And when we made it to Georgia, and of course on I-95, Georgia's only about 100 miles long, the second 50 miles of that on the southern end of the state was pretty much completely shut down. You couldn't get off the exits in order to get gas. You couldn't get off the exits to get food or even try and find a back route because there was no electricity. There was severe flooding. The National Guard was blocking all of those exits. And again, it's just, yeah, all you can do is be patient, because you are understanding that these folks are going through a lot. It's not safe conditions, and everybody's in it together. And I think that actually the drivers on the road were pretty patient with one another. So
It's almost like we need some sort of a rationing system for the roads. Like if your license plate ends with a letter or an even number, today is your day to go back. Otherwise, go tomorrow, and then we'll have Google drive all the cars.
that's
so that
a
we don't
great
have to,
idea. That's a great idea.
Maybe we're a little more careful. Rita, the one thing that I wonder from a perspective of a county commissioner, you know how impatient, well, it wasn't impatient, people got frustrated after a while with the lack of power.
Yeah.
What's the deal with the water? Where's my garbage truck? When are you going to pick up these branches? What kind of feedback do you get from the community, and how do you respond to that as a county commissioner?
You know, considering the amount of people that were without power, and you know, I think the whole county was without power for a small period of time till they start being able to get the power back on. We got a lot of emails and texts and phone calls from people asking us to help if there's anything they can do, or there's certain circumstances. But they've really been patient, and for the most part, they've been pretty kind. They're looking for information, and we find them as much information as we can. And when they have that, they seem to get a little bit more comfortable. The hardest things I think we're dealing with right now is still a lot of flooding in low-lying areas of people that aren't used to it. And they have a lot of water in their homes. And Wendover Farms, where we're at, they actually have gators still swimming across their front yards. And, you know, it becomes a safety issue, and they're frustrated and, you know, really understand. So we're trying to find ways to help alleviate that to the future. But, you know, the day we're in, and I'll throw this out here right now, our water tables are rising around here. And if I haven't seen hurricanes like this before ever. I've lived here a long time. I don't know if this is going to get better or worse. So it's something we need to look forward moving into of how we're going to protect our homes in types of weather like this.
Every time we have a 10 or 11 year event that leaves lots of flooding, we've developed a lot of different things between then and now. Stuff floods that we weren't expecting.
Yeah.
Actually, the newer stuff seems to do pretty well because they
Does.
kind of require so many ponds and drainage things. What do you know about the Indian River Lagoon? Is it faring well? Has it been a major setback in terms of environmental things and some of the projects that we have?
I talked to Virginia, and she's still waiting to get some information on it. What had happened, though, is because of the south winds that pushed all the muck up to District 1.
Oh, great.
So she said she might have to do an analysis, see if they start the muck removal now up at that end more instead of the other end. But sometimes these storms help the salinity of the water and help with fish kills. Well, I'm not real sure that we're going to have this benefit this time. But, you know, Virginia's so smart, and I'm waiting for her to come back with some information so that we see what we're looking at here moving forward with it.
Erica, you and WeVenture posted information offering to help with the resources and direction for small businesses that may be struggling or hit hard by the storm. How does a hurricane threaten a small business?
Honestly, it's really hard. A lot of these small business owners are very, very dependent on the revenues that they're making from a certain week or for a certain month. And if they have to be closed because of damage to their structure or because of damage to their inventory or just simply because of unsafe passing conditions, then it actually can be a real problem. It prevents them from being able to recover as quickly. So, you know, there's a lot of really great bridge loans that are available out there. The state of Florida is offering bridge loans from anywhere from $1,000 to $25,000 for companies that need something to help them get through this time. But I mean, we've talked to people who lost an unbelievable amount of inventory. So not only are they struggling to get their businesses back to being inhabitable, but now they have to go back and try to replace all the things that they've lost before they can even begin to think about opening back up again. And if you're surviving on a week-to-week or a month-to-month kind of basis, that's hard to do. That's a really hard leap to take, and it's tough to come back from. So
Cash flow is everything, and
Cash
many
flow is
times they are
everything.
operating on pure faith and hard work that in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, things are going to bear fruit for them, and it will all be
Absolutely.
worth it.
absolutely.
Interesting. Well, when we come back, an interview with Satellite Beach Mayor Frank Catino. This is Brevard Watch.
Take the BPS CCU High School Mascot debit card anywhere, anyplace. Show your school spirit every time you use your card. Get your favorite BPS CCU High School Mascot debit card today by visiting any CCU branch. Learn more at ccuflorida.org/spirit.
Well, for the latest non-hurricane news from Satellite Beach, we caught up with Mayor Frank Catino. This one-on-one is brought to you by Brevard Public Schools. Frank, let's break some news here about Satellite Beach. What do you have coming up in the year ahead?
Well, we're working on a lot of different projects. We're working on sustainability projects, dealing with charging stations, solar power for City Hall. We hope to make eventually all the buildings in the city run on solar. Our first project will be the City Hall, which is in the works at this time. We're working on a community garden and a mangrove growing facility on our DeSoto property. That's coming along great. Ribbon cutting being Saturday. Working with the school board on a new road projects on Jackson Avenue. What we really want to do in the city is all our streets that connect east and west directly to A1A and South Patrick do streetscape projects. So therefore, what that means is make dedicated bike lanes, wider walking paths on both sides of the road to make it easier for people to use them, to get the people in our community more engaged and outside, putting their car away, walking, riding a bike, someplace. And we've created two of them at this time in Jackson, which is a very busy street. You can realize Jackson Avenue has 3 schools on it.
It's practically Main Street in
Main
Satellite
Street
Beach
has-
after A1A or
right,
South
it has
Patrick.
Holland, Delora, and Surfside, plus the football fields and all the athletic fields that make up that. So a very heavily used street, not only traffic-wise, but pedestrian. So we're working with the school board to create the streetscape on that street.
So you have some big plans. What do you think are the biggest challenges or the things you have to overcome as a city council and City Hall?
Well, one of the big challenges is stormwater.
Okay.
I think not only us, but looking around the Barrier Island, a big challenge because the Barrier Island's 98% built out. So being in a city that's 98% built out with, let me call it old technology, we sure didn't want to pollute the Indian River 1960 when they built this community, and we ran out of land. So one of our challenges is how do we treat the water coming off people's yards, streets, anything stormwater related with the minimal amount of property we have. We're working on a project right now on DeSoto Parkway that we partnered with the military.
Okay.
The DeSoto project was part of an athletic field. And
I used to coach youth football on that field.
How big sports are in
Sure,
town.
it's a big
And our
recreation
view
town.
of recreation. We didn't want to lose it, but we're very limited on where we can do with the water for that section of town. So we partnered, which was part of the P4 initiative that the government had out. They gave us an athletic field up in the north part of our city that's lit, which actually improved the program.
Sure.
And that particular piece of property will be our stormwater.
So you've got some partnerships with the schools you've mentioned.
We did. The Jackson property, the Jackson Road project is one. We partnered with Surfside Elementary School to help them with their playground. It's an open playground, so after school in the evening, it's open to the city and people use it. We're doing a project with Satellite High School for the track. They're upgrading their track. We're going to be a partner with them to help them fund that process. And in return, the track's going to be available to the community on X number of nights to use, for health, get people out moving in the community.
Satellite
So
Beach continuing to
working
be a
great.
recreation capital
We
of
are.
Brevard County.
The other thing we did this year I think was great, and really our city manager is the force behind this. We had the first skate park in the county. It got old, and we redid it, and it opened up this year. And our thought was the park before you had to pay an admission fee, and we have taken the fee. It's an open, free park. We didn't want kids not be able to use it because they couldn't afford to go there. We would rather have them in places with recreation than sitting outside and not have the use of it. So the park opened. It's a huge hit, very new, modern park, and most of the kids there have ownership in this park. They designed it. We got a group of them together. They sat down with the designer of the skate park and said, what do you want on it? So they took some ownership in it. They designed the park, and it opened up. It's a really great facility.
Well, we're talking in the studio today with County Commissioner Rita Pritchett, who represents North Brevard. That includes Titusville, Port St. John, MIMS, I believe, and Western Cocoa. We're also with We Venture Executive Director Erica Lemp, whose organization supports entrepreneurs and is based at Florida Tech. Well, let's talk about the business climate in Brevard County. And we're going to talk to Rita about this too, because she has a very strong perspective on this from North Brevard.
Sure.
You are in the business of coaching businesses. Things have changed a lot since the late 2010, 2011 period of time. How would you size up the business climate and the infrastructure for business startups here in Brevard County?
I think things are continuing to improve. Frankly, as we're seeing our big businesses grow, that's good for small business. That's really good for small business because it creates an ecosystem with a solid pool of individuals who are looking at getting things going. There's a great quality of life in this area. Main Street USA is really getting stronger, which is just so nice to see. Pretty much anything that is good for business in general in Brevard County is going to be good for small business in Brevard County just the same. And when you look at that from the flip side, anything that's good for small businesses is going to be really great for big business. It's great for talent attraction. It is great for
They can buy the company.
They can-
if they
yeah,
need
well,
some
sure,
new
there's-
capability or talent.
acquisition. I think talent attraction is a big one when you're looking at things like trailing spouses that are coming in, with people who are getting jobs at some of these big businesses. They've got people who maybe want to start a business, or they just want great quality of life. They want these small businesses to be there to enhance what the life that they're living on a daily basis. So, there's a really great symbiotic relationship between big business and small business. So the things that are happening here and some of these great new businesses that are coming in, some of the expansion that's happening in the south end of the county, for the businesses that are already there, like your Northrop Grummins, that's great. It's really, really good for the business climate. It's good for all business.
I think sometimes we naively think that the Northrop Grummins of the world, maybe the Blue Origins, are going to be attracted by the beach. We've got great weather, come to the beach, it doesn't cost a lot here. But it's interesting, I was talking to some tech startup people, especially internet developer people, and that is actually a thing where for them, living in an inexpensive place near the beach means that their startup capital burns slower. They can live longer on that seed money that they have, and they can still go out and get entertainment and do stuff with their family because it's the beach and it's the
Right.
water, and it's really something kind of cool. Rita, now you have been involved in North Brevard for some time. Is Titusville back? Is North Brevard back in your view from where it was when the shuttle layoffs happened and things really got dark up there?
We're doing so much better. We're not completely out of the woods yet, but there's a lot of recovery coming. I love your philosophy on the small business and large business connections. I agree with that totally. And we started economic development zone up there about 5 or 6 years ago, and it's starting to work. And we have OneWeb coming in and Blue Origin. And the neat thing about this is they've already started investing a lot of financial aspects to the company as far as building the buildings, but they're just now starting to bring in the workforce and hiring. And the Cape's up to full production. They're up to the full amount of employees now that had left. But these companies are starting to hire. And up in North Brevard now, they're starting to build homes and apartment complexes. We have one new apartment complex that isn't even finished being built. Is 60% leased by Blue Origin right now, by the employees that they're bringing in, that they haven't brought in yet. So it's getting quite exciting, which is starting to make the small businesses flourish. And so we've been able to take the zone funds, and we'll be able to reinvest them into the community. And what we've done up there, we have a great zone board. They're made up of CPAs, CPOs, and they're very particular where we're investing the funds, and so we put it into these businesses that have a great return on the investment. And we're starting to see that, and I'm really excited to see in the next 2 years the boost in the economy that's about to come from these investments we've made in District 1.
The thing that strikes me about the North Brevard Economic Zone is that it's not there to beautify the place. I mean, there are some community redevelopment agencies, and that's what they're doing. They're doing street lights and street signs, and that's terrific.
Yeah.
You know, Satellite Beach did beach parks. In North Brevard, they are doing deals. They're building clean rooms or helping companies that want to come in, do that kind of thing. You've got a software company that's going in downtown Titusville.
Yeah.
Was it Red Canyon?
It is Red Canyon.
AstroPac was
Yeah.
a company up there.
Yep.
We've got other space and rocket type companies. That's
Ruwag, they're building the satellites for OneWeb. We're hungry for jobs. We went through that time period of losing all our jobs. The family moved out. My children took my grandchildren, so it got a little personal. But we're hungry for jobs. We're hungry to get people to work and have them feel good about being able to provide for the families and pay their electric bills. And that's what we're starting to see. And I'm wanting to see the age drive down a bit. We had gotten so old because we had left a retirement population when everybody moved out. So.
Yeah.
Our focus up there, our mission statement in District 1 I have on the board is a 20% population increase and driving the median age down to under 45. So that's what we're working towards up there with everything we're doing.
That's
Jobs.
interesting. I never would have thought of trying to get up the median age lower. Now, is this something that some of the groups that you're connected with, Erica, can help with or are involved with? I mean, getting some of the young entrepreneurs in there and helping start them up?
Well, sure. I think that there's a lot to be said for, the kinds of businesses that you have going on in North Brevard, because it's a lot more diversified than it used to be.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of really neat things that are happening there. One of a great place is the Bricks Project.
Yeah.
Which I think getting more places, like, have you been to the Bricks Project
I have
yet?
not been to it.
Okay, so it's
Totally cool.
it's very cool.
Yeah.
It's Playa Linda Brewing Company.
Right.
They have 2 different sites. They have one in downtown Titusville, which is at an old hardware store.
I've been to there,
And
that
then,
is cool.
and they've opened up a place called the Bricks Project, which is also, it's food, it's drink. They've got some craft cocktails. They have basically everything that's going to drive some of those younger demographics to the area. And I think that if we can see more business owners, more small business owners, opening things, not necessarily to compete with that, but that are along that same vein, then it's going to help get people not only to work in the Titusville area, but to live in the
live there,
Titusville
yeah.
area.
That's true. I mean, I've worked and have not lived in some small towns in Florida, including DeLand and some other places that were just so sleepy. It was fine to go there to work, but as soon as it was 5 or 6 o'clock, you just got in the car and you left. And that's not good for a city or a community. You want people to be down there, shopping there, eating and dining there, being proud of the place, talking about it, and doing all those kinds of other things. We've seen that in Melbourne quite a bit, I think, and Cocoa Village. Well, it seems like Titusville's got a lot of potential.
It does. That's what we're working on, those types of things too. We did a study in that age group that you're talking about that we're trying to attract with young families. They're not so interested in ascertaining a lot of assets. They're looking for quality of life and these types of things to do and outside events. And so that's what we're kind of focusing on, getting the good businesses and industries in there. And I love that because it does drive all these small businesses. If you pass around the same dollar all day long, you're not going to get any extra coming in. So it's just we're focusing on the entrepreneurials and the industries and new businesses. And you know what? It's working. It's just starting to work, and it's a good day in North Brevard.
Well, you both are probably familiar with the SWOT analysis, the strength, weakness, opportunity, and threats. I think we've talked a little bit about the strengths a little bit here. What are the weaknesses that we have that we still have to overcome as a community to get more businesses to be successful, to help communities thrive? What do you see?
Well, I think, again, in terms of small businesses, always a threat is just access to capital. Particularly when you're coming off of a major disaster or you've got a lot of other projects going on, a lot of those funds that would normally be going towards small business startup are going towards small business recovery. Or instead of going towards small business startup, they're going towards all kinds of other things that are considered to be more pressing issues. So I think that as long as we're continuing to look at new business startup as a way for economic recovery to continue to happen, then that hopefully will continue to be a good thing. But that's always going to be a bit of a weakness. I think it's hard to overcome the need for access to capital.
Yeah. We have I would think we have like internal weaknesses and external weaknesses. Internal, we have to make sure we stay hungry, and that we're continually trying to aggressively bring in the new businesses. We've had a tendency up there at times to get so relaxed. We were built on the Cape industry, and everything got real relaxed. You think nothing's going to change, so we had to diversify greatly and start bringing in new types of businesses and industries and opportunity to expand how we bring in families. And then the external ones, I think the threats could be, or our weaknesses could be, that we're not ready for the growth, or that we, politically, we could be a big hindrance with government of encouraging businesses to come in. I've heard so many times people say, you give these businesses money in the corporate welfare term. Well, this isn't your daddy's economics. What worked in the 60s is not working today. It's highly competitive. And I got into this 6 years ago. I'm a grandmother. I'm a CPA. I work at a church. And
you ran as a conservative Republican, and I would say you're a fairly conservative office holder.
I'm conservative. But if you don't understand the economics and the competition out there, and you're not willing to throw out these types of incentives, they won't come here, because all the other states are competing for these, and they'll go there. So we got quite aggressive with this, and that's where the zone dollars are really working, because we've been able to compete with some dollars. And before that, we weren't able to, and it's working. So, you can argue with the ideology of everything, but you can't argue with the testimony that it's working.
And I would add on to that I think that as a community, we have to be willing to change a bit.
We do.
It's to your point, we did the same thing for such a long time, assuming things would never change, and they do. That's life. Things change. And so I think that oftentimes we get stuck in a place where it's, well, this is how things have always been, this is how they should always be, but that doesn't work for the speed of commerce. It just doesn't. And so, it may work for a sleepy bedroom community, but if that's not what we're aspiring to be, then we need to look at how we're going to change and advance and evolve to be the kind of community that can support business growth.
What about threats? Are there any just straight up threats that are on the horizon for us? Are we going to, the ingredients look good? Conditions look good? Is there anything that you see out there that we need to be mindful of if we're planning government or businesses that you can think of?
A couple days ago, I would have said Maria.
Right.
Honestly, I think in terms of threats, a lot of it has to do with these stronger storms that keep seeming to come through. We hadn't been hit with anything in a really long time, and then we got the double whammy of Matthew last year, Irma this year. And it was close calls looking at some of those other storms. There was a point there where we weren't sure if Jose was going to impact us. We weren't sure if Maria was going to impact us, and we're still a month and a half out from being out of hurricane season here. So, we, in terms of it being a threat, if we go through several more years where we have major hurricanes and we're always in recovery mode, it's hard to grow when you're in recovery mode. So I think that is a legitimate threat.
Rita?
The hurricanes, after they hit, I actually think a little differently than I did maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. Because studying out what happened in Houston, I thought, one big event here could really change the life of everybody. And so I started thinking a little bit differently, and That's quite a thought, a sobering thought. I think if we had the 4 hurricanes come through like we did a few years ago, it would greatly impact our ability to expand and grow right now, because we're in such a momentous time right now of growth. I think another threat we could possibly have is what comes out of Tallahassee. You know, changes they make as far as funding for the space agency and business. And we've, you know, whether you like Governor Scott or not, he knows business. And he's had an ingredient here that's made us the second best growing state in the nation. And the incentives he's brought in and the ideas he's brought really has brought a great economic recovery to our areas. You know, our area got hit the hardest. We had the housing problem and the banking problem and the space industry go all at the same time. And so these incentives that have been coming in for the past years are working. So if those all of a sudden just cut off, which are threatened all the time,
Yeah.
then, you know, that could be quite a threat to keeping the growth going. I think we just have to stay so hungry and keep in front of them, letting them know how important these jobs are to our economy and our homes.
I think the biggest, sneakiest threat is what happens with insurance prices.
Oh, that's, yeah.
You know, immediately after a storm, they're going to, not only do they have losses that they need to, that the reinsurers need to recuperate and that they can charge, but also, you know, the insurance companies work the rating system in Tallahassee. It's part of their business model, and it's all about convincing people that they should be more afraid, and so that they pay insurance companies more. Well, when you increase somebody's premium $500 and $1,000, and you multiply that across tens of thousands of properties, that's reverse economic impact. That's
Yeah.
that much money
Yeah.
just going out of Brevard County for nothing to go to someplace like Bermuda or Switzerland or someplace where the capital is kept. But we'll turn things a little around here a little bit and talk about something more positive. One of the things that I heard on the campaign trail quite a bit from state representatives, senators, I've heard it at League of Cities events, is that workforce is really the linchpin right now. That the incentives to big companies was still important, but getting the right kind of workforce and enough people trained here is really, really key. What do you make of that, Erica?
I would agree with that. I mean, it's very, very difficult to attract businesses to this area if you don't have the people to work in the jobs there. So one of the best ways to do that is by looking at it from a perspective of how do we build up these various sectors to make sure that there are people ready and willing to go into these jobs, but also how are we attracting those individuals from other areas where those jobs are currently existing. And so I think we have a lot going for us that way. I mean, if you look at some of these high-tech businesses, one of the biggest competitive areas that we have is maybe Northern California. Well, there's a lot of things that Northern California has that we don't have. However, cost of living is something that we can absolutely trump them on every single day. I mean, we have very affordable very, very affordable cost of living here. So I think that is a big help. I think it's understanding what people want if they're going to relocate here, but also building up the workforce that we have here. And I know that there's a lot of initiatives in place looking at, for instance, Career Source Brevard is their sector strategies to make sure that they are examining what workforce needs are now, what workforce needs are going to be in the coming years, and trying to address that with Brevard Public Schools to make sure that we're educating people and getting these kids excited about some of these careers that maybe they hadn't thought of before.
Rita? Florida
Today published an article a while ago that said the North is rising again, talking about North Brevard. I went to a seminar 2 years ago at Florida League of Cities, and I wish I remember the man's name, but he did a long lecture on the South will rise again, and it got my attention, and he kind of gave a perspective of what's about to happen, about everybody moving into Florida to find the jobs, and I'm seeing it. So what we have with the workforce is we had a lot of the workforce move out with the economic collapse that we had, and so they've started moving back, and our population's back to that level almost right now, number for number. But we're going to have to go out now and start bringing them in from other states. But something I know we're going to talk about this in a few minutes. I think what we need to start working on with the school focus is training up people in these areas of vocations to meet the needs of all the technology jobs that are coming in, like making the satellites and the kind of workers that OneWeb's going to need in Blue Origin and these new industries that are moving in. And there's some really cool things getting ready to come too. But they're looking right now to move people in from around the country, which is good for us. People move in, families move in, the economy grows. But I want to be able to keep our children here too when they graduate from high school with jobs. And I know this is getting lengthy, but we got an opportunity to go to Washington, and Senator Rubio was very strong about getting the workforce trained up. In Florida Power and Light, they'll hire linemen now for $100,000 a year, but they can't get anybody trained to do it. So I think getting the diversity out to these children and getting them trained, or the workforce with these younger people, they don't necessarily have to go to college anymore. I think they'll all flock here because we have opportunity as well as location.
Well, on that note, and straight ahead on Brevard Watch, we're going to ask our guests how they would improve public education in Brevard County.
Take the BPS CCU High School Mascot Debit Card anywhere, anyplace. Show your school spirit every time you use your card. Get your favorite BPS CCU High School Mascot Debit Card today by visiting any CCU branch. Learn more at ccuflorida.org/spirit.
This is Brevard Watch. I'm Matt Reed. This program is sponsored by Community Credit Union, a longtime supporter of Brevard Public Schools, financially and through ethics education for our young people. We're joined today by County Commissioner Rita Pritchett, who represents North Brevard, including Titusville, Port St. John, Mims, and Western Cocoa. We're also joined by We Venture Director Erica Lemp, whose organization supports Space Coast entrepreneurs. I asked the question a little bit before the break. You've had a minute to think about it. If you could change or improve one thing about Brevard Public Schools, what would it be? Let's start with Erica.
It's not so much a change, but it's a continuation of some of these really great things that we've got going on in terms of getting kids excited about STEM fields. So many of these new businesses that we have coming in are STEM related. And so just looking at some non-traditional fields, things that haven't existed before, jobs that don't even exist yet. And I think that's a big thing, is that there's jobs out there that don't exist yet that these kids are going to need to be able to fill. And so getting them, and they're going to be creating a lot of these jobs, actually, if we think about it in terms of entrepreneurship, as I do. There's some great maker spaces that were made available through a grant from Northrop Grumman in the south end of the county. I got a chance to go and tour those. Seeing these kids get so excited about creating things and looking at the science of stuff and just seeing how these different connections are made was great. And it's that opportunity to get excited. And then I got to tour a school up in Titusville, actually, where they had done a CSI project on a classroom grant through the Schools Foundation. And again, it's just getting kids excited about stuff. I remember when I was in elementary school, and just the things that made me want to do the things that I'm doing now are the experiential learning activities. And I think that the more that we can increase that, the more that we can make that commonplace within the classroom, the better we're going to be. This is a digital group of kids that are growing up now, and if we can give them the opportunity to get hands-on with things, it's going to make them more well-prepared in the workforce and the jobs that they're going to be taking later on. It's just going to make them more well-rounded individuals, and I think that we owe it to them to be able to do that kind of thing.
Rita?
I would like to see a little bit more focus being moved into the areas where kids can get the hand-on training for different fields they can go into. Not every child's made to go to college. You know, I raised 6 kids and I realize this, but you know, they're good with other aspects. And so if we could get them trained into something that interests them, so they can get right out there and get busy with their career. I mean, you still make a good living and without having to have a 4-year or 6-year degree. And actually, some of those degrees aren't even able to provide jobs. So I think just figuring out what the child's going to be good at and finding a way to train them in it. I do see us going more into a computer age, and so maybe some online courses or online studies. I think the school system's already utilizing that. But I have to tell you, I've raised all my kids in Brevard County schools. I grew up in them. My grandchildren are in them, and I think it's the best schools in the state. I think we have an excellent school system, and my family has gotten a great education here in Brevard.
Well, if I could change one thing, it would be to change a lot of different things. If I could have $20 million, something like that,
Money, yeah.
I would take
Yeah.
all of the cool vocational programs that are working that impress people and just double them, just replicate them
Yeah.
someplace. If they're building satellites at Merritt Island High School, why not also build satellites at Satellite High School? If you've got an AC repair program that's teaching kids at Space Coast High School, why not also do that at, O'Galley High School? You know, you have a lot of great vocational programs in Brevard Public Schools, but they're scattered all over the place, and it's
Yeah.
kind of hard to get to those if you don't live in that region, at least. I know that Brevard Public Schools is looking at starting some new busing, some choice busing programs that would get kids, say if you live in Rockledge, and the maritime program that's right there that's awesome isn't quite for you, and you want to go do machining at Cocoa High School, you can hop on a bus and go to Cocoa High School, or vice versa. I think that would be the thing that I would change. I also think changing math. You talked about how people learn through hands-on things, and I just remember daydreaming through years of math class. Just, best daydreams ever, and just I could not learn from somebody on an overhead projector. Everything I know about math, I learned from fixing bikes or doing light construction for summer jobs, or later on, making beer in my closet at home when I was too young to buy it. Things like that, really, hands-on experiences are great ways to learn, and it would probably be best if people did it legally in the classroom and not in their closets at home without mom watching. Let's move on a little bit. There was an item in the news that involves county commissioners. I think it's such a signature thing for Brevard, but we are coming off a hurricane. Just want your take on this. We are moving forward with some major beach renourishment. Millions of dollars, I believe, in the mid-reach area that goes from, I think, the Pineda Causeway down to India Atlantic.
Yes.
Also somewhere south of there. Explain.
We're heavy tourism.
Okay.
So beaches are a real important aspect of our economy here. And you know what? We talked about it earlier, how the new companies are moving in and they're living in a beach community. So beaches to us are extremely important. And if we didn't have the tourism, we're going to be paying personal taxes. It's quite a benefit that we have having tourism here. The money that we're using to replenish the beaches, and I know it's still tax dollars, but it's coming out of the tourist bed tax dollars. So for every dollar that we invest, let me tell you what I know from these numbers. We're going to put an $8 million investment. There's going to be $1.6 million return from these dollars. And, it's the tourism, but it's also saving the infrastructure. The roads are getting washed into the water, the beaches and the river. So it's saving that. And, whether you like the environment or birds and turtles, it's a big deal to them turtles having those beaches to lay their eggs in. And we're the number one turtle egg nesting place in the whole world. And so, as far as taking care of the environment, bringing the funds still coming in for our economy, and keeping the infrastructure, roads, and there's a lot of power and sewer lines there too. It's really a win-win for our area to do it. I know it's expensive, but the return is well worth it.
Somebody is going to say you should be fixing your roads with that money and not putting sand that can be washed away by the next storm. Somebody's going to ask you that, and they probably already have. How do you respond to that?
Well, if you don't do the beaches, there's going to be a lot more roads we're going to have to be fixing for all the roads that run up and down through, the Air Force Base and along the water areas. It's we've had a lot of roads wash away already, so it's something we have to do. We still need to fix roads, but we have such a deficit in the roads funds. The only way to do that is we're going to have to do a tax increase down the road. The whole commission agrees with that right now. It's just having somebody be able to bring the ability to bring it forward and vote on it, but it's something we're going to have to do. We're growing as a community. You guys know this. So, we're going to have to work on infrastructure tax dollars to be able to take care of this growth. You can't live in a good county and keep cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting taxes when you're growing, or it's not going to be a community anybody wants to live in. There's things we have to do responsibly responsibly. So I don't know which tax revenue we'll do to fund that, but cutting away from something we need to fix another thing is not a smart move. We got to be able to take care of it all.
What do you make of that, Erica?
I mean, from the perspective of business and the perspective of the economy, if you're looking at our beaches, and again, ecotourism, like you mentioned, I mean, tourism as a whole, people love to come hang out on the beaches, but just ecotourism with our turtles and our seabirds and the wildlife sanctuaries that are taking place around the beaches, all of that, anybody that you're bringing into the county, those are people that are coming in and eating in our restaurants. Those are people that are coming in and buying things from our stores. They may decide that they want to come and set down roots here. They may want to open a business. They may want to get a job here. It's a big ecosystem, all of it. So, I mean, when you're looking at having the tax base and the tax dollars to be able to pay for roads, well, you can't do that if you don't have the people to pay the taxes. So I think that the beaches, they make a huge impact that way. They help keep people in this area. They attract people to this area. And, I mean, that's good for everybody.
That was the case that was made with the Indian River Lagoon.
Mm-hmm.
And it really was an unusual amount of consensus that seemed to form around saving the lagoon. Florida Today did story after story. We had political movements. There were big get-togethers to save the lagoon. You saw conservatives, environmentalists, boaters, fishing people, Florida Tech scientists, and business people all coming together to say that. Is that consensus still around today? Are we seeing that in other ways, or now? What do you think, Rita? We still enjoying that? Are there other ways to apply that consensus?
I think quality of life to the people that live here, it's an important aspect to us. And so, you know, I was fascinated myself with all the different ends of the political, I don't know how to put this, but I was surprised that the Democrats and the Republicans were all in agreement upon this thing that we had to do for our lagoon, because it makes sense. It's common sense.
Right.
And I was also surprised with all the work that Florida Today did and the economists coming and showing how much money that river generates into our economy. You know, all the people that come and enjoy the river and it increases property values too. So the people that own houses along the river, they pay a lot more in taxes than those who don't. So, you know, I've thought about this, just being involved in accounting growing up. If you own stock in a corporation and they have a banner year, you're going to get dividends. If you don't have any stock in it, you're not going to get a return on investment. So if you don't invest in your community on those things that have great returns, you're never going to grow economically or being able to have people move in or to have any. You're going to die out, and that's just not the county I want to live in.
Erica, I want to just give you a chance to
I
plug.
can't agree with that more.
Want to say that again?
I couldn't agree with that more. It was.
Your organization recently had a major event.
We did.
It was the Impact Conference, brought people together. Why don't you describe that and tell us what happened?
Yeah, it was a really just cool event. We held it on August 24th down at the Henniger in downtown Melbourne. And the idea was that it's our annual Impact Business and Leadership Summit. And we changed it a lot this year. Usually it's a full-day event. It had been a series of panels, and it was a great event, but I wanted to do something different. I wanted to find a way to re-energize people. And so one of the things that we decided to do was create an event. We called it Interesting Stories from Interesting Women. We had 6 fantastic speakers tell their personal...
TED Talk type things.
Yes, exactly, but I'm not allowed to say that, so...
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I going to have to put a little TM or something like that?
Is that kind of an idea, though? This idea of inspiring people and telling people's personal journeys, their personal stories, and the business lessons that they learned in the process. So we were able to have... people relate on different levels. So we talked about mentorship, and we talked about personal branding, and we talked about what you do when the chips are down. You know, if you've got some kind of a personal tragedy that you're dealing with, how do you get above that? How do you continue to fight and get yourself to a point where you're being able to be successful again. And so just the variety of women that we had come and speak, we had entrepreneurs, we had people in business, we had some social service folks there, and it just was such a great day. And I think it really, it really did its name proud, impact, because it was very, very impactful. Our keynote speaker is actually a woman by the name of Kelsey Humphreys, who is out of Oklahoma City. But what her goal is she's trying to build this media little empire. She wants to be the Jimmy Fallon of entrepreneurship. And so she is a traveling talk show. She goes around the country and talks to all of these different amazing business leaders and breaks down what she calls success for the rest of us. And it's just that simple. And she's interviewed people like the Property Brothers. She has interviewed Elon Musk. She's interviewed Simon Sinek, Seth Godin. So all of these amazing people, and Larry King, have invited her into their homes or into their offices to get a better understanding of what it is that makes them tick as business people. And so she was able to share a lot of that with us, and some just tips for success and ways to sort of keep yourself moving forward and keep yourself striving towards who you want to be and how you want to live. And it was a great day.
You gonna do it again?
Absolutely.
Every
year.
You should totally have this county commissioner from Titusville come and speak to the women.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about her. Could you introduce me?
Rita Pritchett, you have some interesting projects started and ideas that are happening up in North Brevard. I hear that there's a little something going on regarding sports. And why don't you fill us in?
We are in planning stages right now of building an indoor sports arena. And it's there's such a need. USSSA moved in recently into the county, and it's phenomenal.
It's unbelievable how they've expanded that site for Space Coast Stadium out.
I know. Well, the man has invested $13 million on top of it, and the county, of course, is bringing in the funds to help. That's our property. We got to keep it up and have a value. But I mean, he's built fields. He's got the tournaments, coming in. I actually went to a game. It was a lot of fun. And so we went and we spoke with him, and we were going to look at doing soccer fields, because I think this is a great economic driver for the county. So we wanted part of it too, and he's willing to share the love with the rest of the districts. So that's what was the conversation. And he said, well, no, this is what we need. We need an indoor facility where we can host the cheerleading competitions and the basketball competitions and dog shows. And there's even jump rope competitions where they need these big facilities. And people travel from all over the country. And I grew up playing softball, and our whole family would go and stay in the hotels.
Sure.
And it drives 400 or 500 families a minimal to these places for tournaments, which is hotel nights, restaurants, and it really boosts the economy. And you know what? This is kind of the tourism you want, family tourism. It's not a lot to fix when they go. So it's a great project we're working on right now. Some of the smartest people I've ever been around are coming together with ideas, and everybody's together with the same consensus. And I'm thinking in about a year and a half we might have that thing up and running.
And unlike spring breakers, these young people come with their parents.
They do.
Keep them in line a little bit.
They do.
Well, that's our program for this week. My thanks to County Commissioner Rita Pritchett and
Thank you.
Venture Director Erica Lemp for joining us in the BPS studio today. Our thanks again to Community Credit Union for supporting our effort to educate the community about government, business, and education. I'm Matt Reed. Join us next week on Brevard Watch.